This is what happened to me when my husband left for a business trip. I thought I knew myself, but 3 days alone with my niece changed everything. I never expected to feel so alive, so desirous. Dancing in the living room, his hands on my waist, I knew I had crossed a line. But I couldn't stop myself, the way he looked at me. It was intoxicating. This story will drive you crazy at the end. If you like it, I'll start. Before that day, I hadn't thought much about Eric. He was just Alex's nephew, a distant relative I only saw at family gatherings. When Alex told me Eric was coming to stay, I nodded and smiled. What else could I do? After all, it was only for 3 days. But the moment Eric walked through our door, something changed inside me. He wasn't the strange young man I remembered. As time passed, he had transformed into a man I didn't recognize at all. His broad shoulders filled out his t-shirt in a way that took my breath away. The confident steps he took as he entered our house made me feel strange, uncomfortable. Yes, I was aware of it. Alex's words echoed in my mind. Eric is sensitive. Take care of him. But as I watched Eric put down his bag and send me a warm smile, he didn't seem sensitive at all. There was a strength, a confidence in his gaze that suddenly made me feel ashamed of myself. I felt a pang of loneliness as Alex kissed me goodbye. 3 days alone with Eric stretching out before me. I tried to focus on Alex's lips, but my mind kept going to the other young man, standing a few feet away from me. I could feel his eyes on us, and when Alex moved away, I couldn't help but look at Eric. We locked eyes, and I saw something there. Something that made my heart beat faster. I tried to push the feeling away. I wasn't supposed to feel this way about my nephew. He was family, for God's sake. But when I saw Alex walking away towards the car, I couldn't help myself. Eric and I were alone, and the house suddenly felt too small, too intimate. So, Eric said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "What should we do first, Aunt Daisy? I guess I should show you to your room. You must be tired from the trip." Eric nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "Not at all. I feel energized, actually. It's nice to be here with you." I swallowed hard and tried to ignore my pulse racing at his words. "Well, that's good. I'm glad you're comfortable here." Slowly, side by side, we made our way upstairs. "Here we are," I said as I pushed open the door to the guest room. "I hope it's comfortable enough for you." Eric walked in and looked around appreciatively. "Perfect, Aunt Daisy. Thank you." When he turned to me, there was something in his eyes that made me feel vulnerable. It was as if he could see right through me, read every inappropriate thought that had crossed my mind since he arrived. "I'm glad you're here," I heard myself say, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "It'll be good to have someone with me while Alex is away." Eric's smile widened and he took a step closer to me. "I'm glad I'm here too. I've always admired you, you know. You're so alive, full of life." His words passed over me, and I felt a warmth spreading through my body. I knew this was dangerous territory, but I couldn't hold myself back. "That's very kind of you to say," I managed to say, my voice sounding breathless even to my own ears. Eric reached out, his hand resting inches from my arm. "It's just the truth. I've always thought you were a wonderful person, Aunt Daisy, and now that I'm here, I can't help but notice how beautiful your body and face are." I knew I had to stop this, to set boundaries, to remind him that I was his aunt, his uncle's wife, but instead I couldn't say anything. I busied myself in the kitchen, trying to ignore Eric's gaze, my hands shaking slightly as I prepared the food. When had he gotten so big? The boy I remembered had been replaced by a tall, confident man. "You look great, Aunt Daisy." I felt my cheeks flush. I couldn't meet his eyes. My heart was beating fast, so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "I'm serious," she continued, leaning closer. "You are the most beautiful woman I know." I knew I had to stop this, to set boundaries, but part of me didn't want to. When was the last time Alex had looked at me like that, with such open admiration? I couldn't remember. His hand touched mine as he handed Eric a plate. I found myself wondering what I shouldn't do, how his lips would feel against mine, how his strong arms would wrap around me. We sat down to eat, and I realized with startling clarity that Eric was not the shy, sensitive boy Alex had described. He was a man who knew what he wanted, and I could see in his eyes that he wanted me. "Tell me about your day," I said, trying to break the tension. But as Eric spoke, I found myself mesmerized by the way his lips moved, the way his eyes sparkled when he laughed. We finished our meal nicely. As we cleared the table, Eric's hand touched my waist. It was a light touch, barely there, but it sent shockwaves through my system. I froze, caught between the urge to lean into his touch and the voice in my head screaming that it was forbidden. "I'm glad we could spend time together," Eric murmured, his breath warming my ear. I've always admired you, Aunt Daisy. You're so strong, so beautiful. Eric. I whispered, my voice barely audible. We shouldn't. But even as I said it, I knew I didn't mean it. The forbidden nature of the attraction between us seemed to heighten every sensation. Everywhere he touched me, my skin tingled and my body ached for more. I found myself wondering about the 2 days that lay ahead of us, Alex gone, leaving us alone in a house full of unspoken desires. What would happen if I surrendered just once? The thought both frightened and excited me. As the evening wore on, I felt myself on a knife edge, every laugh, every accidental touch, every loaded look bringing me closer to the abyss. I knew that once I fell, there was no going back. The question was not if it would happen, but when. The music swirled around us, soft and slow, as Eric held out his hand. My heart began to pound. I knew I should refuse, but my body betrayed me. Before I had a second thought, my hand was in his, warm and strong. As we began to rock, I felt an intensity of feeling I hadn't experienced in years. It was as if the world had vanished, leaving only Eric and me. His hands found my waist and pulled me closer. I could feel the warmth of his body, the strength in his arms. It was intoxicating. I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm wash over me. When was the last time I felt so alive, so desired? Alex's compliments had become routine, almost mechanical. But here in Eric's arms, I felt truly seen, appreciated. My skin tingled where his fingers grazed my back, sending shivers down my spine. We moved together, our bodies in perfect harmony. I couldn't help marveling at how natural it felt, an old music pulsing through us, connecting us in a way that went beyond words. I found myself leaning towards him, inhaling his scent. It was a heady mix of cologne and something of Eric's. When we turned, I glanced at our reflection in the window, and what I saw took my breath away. We looked so much alike, like two pieces of a puzzle that had finally found their match. I barely recognized myself. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes shining with excitement. I looked younger and more alive than I had in years. Eric's breath whispered warmly in my ear, "You are incredible, Daisy. You deserve to feel alive." His words sent a jolt through me, waking parts of me that I thought had been asleep for so long. I wanted to protest, to remind him that I was his aunt and that this was wrong, but I never said anything like that. Instead, I found myself growing closer, craving his touch more and more, our bodies moving as one, the line between us blurring with each passing moment. I could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady in my chest. Time seemed to stop. I forgot how long we had been dancing, lost in the feeling of being held, of being wanted. In that moment I felt more myself than I had in years. Not Aunt Daisy, not Alex's wife, just me. A woman with desire, passion, life. The realization was both exciting and frightening. How long had I been sleepwalking through my life, moving without really feeling? When the song ended, Eric didn't let go of her hand. Instead, his hand cupped my face, his thumb lightly caressing my cheek. I leaned into his touch, unable to resist the comfort it offered. Our eyes met, and I saw my own longing reflected in his gaze. "Daisy," he murmured, "I've never met anyone like you." I knew I had to get away. It was dangerous territory where we were walking. But I still wanted to be with him. As Eric's lips hovered inches from mine, I felt myself balancing on the edge of a cliff. I was so stressed, and I had to make a decision. My mind was trying to make sense of the situation. How had we gotten here? Just a few days ago, he was my nephew, someone I was supposed to look after. Now he was a man standing in front of me, with the fire of desire burning in his eyes. I knew I had to get away from there, but my body refused to listen to me. It was as if all those years of feeling ignored, of longing for that spark of passion, had culminated in this moment. Eric's hand cupped my cheek, his thumb traced my lower lip. His gentle touch sent shivers down my spine. "Tell me you don't want this," he whispered, his voice hoarse with need. I couldn't speak, I couldn't breathe. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about right and wrong, was slipping away. In that moment there was only Eric and the overwhelming desire coursing through my veins. When our lips finally met, it was like a dam breaking. All the longing, all the pent-up passion I had held inside for so long burst out. I kissed her with the fervor I thought I had lost years ago. My hands reached for her hair, pulling her closer and closer to me, desperate for more contact. The rational part of my brain tried to remind me of the consequences, of the betrayal. But the thumping of my heart and the feeling of Eric's hands exploring my body drowned it out. For the first time in years I felt alive, really alive. We stumbled into the bedroom, our arms and legs entwined, and we began to kiss. I knew there was no going back. Everything was about to change, and a small part of me was really enjoying it. For too long, I had been living in the shadow of my marriage, feeling unseen and unappreciated. Now, with Eric, I felt desired, beautiful, and worthy of passion. As we lay on the bed, I glanced at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't just Alex's wife or Eric's aunt. She was alive, her eyes sparkling with a newfound spark. I had trouble recognizing myself, but I still felt more like myself than I had in years. Eric's hands roamed over my body, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. Every touch, every kiss was like a discovery. I leaned into him, wanting more, wanting to lose myself completely in this moment. "You're incredible, Daisy," Eric murmured against my skin. "You deserve to feel alive." As our bodies moved together, I felt an intensity of emotion I hadn't experienced in years. Guilt and excitement warred inside me, but the most dominant feeling was one of liberation. In Eric's arms, I was not just Aunt Daisy or Alex's wife. I was a woman rediscovering her passion and worth. The intensity of our connection took my breath away. It wasn't just physical. There was an emotional intimacy I didn't realize I was missing. Eric's gaze held mine, full of admiration and desire. I saw myself in his eyes, and for the first time I liked what I saw. Time seemed to stand still as we explored each other. Our bodies moving in perfect synchronicity, I gasped as his lips moved down my neck, my body leaning into his. "We shouldn't," I whispered, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew I didn't mean them. My body screamed for more, craving his touch like a desert craves rain. Eric paused, his eyes meeting mine. "I've wanted you for so long, Daisy," he admitted, his voice full of emotion. "You're the most amazing woman I've ever known. Strong, beautiful, incredible." His words washed over me like a warm wave, filling me with a sense of worth I hadn't felt in years. In that moment, I felt truly seen and appreciated, as if Eric could see the real me, beyond all my insecurities, beyond the roles I play in my daily life. As we made love, I felt a profound change within myself. Every touch, every caress seemed to awaken something that had been asleep for a long time. I felt more alive and energized than I had felt in years. It wasn't just a physical sensation, though that was incredible. It was an emotional connection, a feeling of being truly desired and appreciated. Eric's hands roamed over my body with a confidence that surprised me. He seemed to know exactly how to touch me, how to make me feel things I had forgotten I could feel. Each kiss, each caress was like a spark, igniting a passion I thought had long since been extinguished. As our bodies moved together, I felt a sense of liberation I had never experienced before. In Eric's arms, I wasn't just Aunt Daisy or Alex's wife. I was a woman rediscovering her passion, her worth. The world outside this room ceased to exist. There was only us, this moment, and the jarring realization that nothing would ever be the same again. Eric whispered words of adoration as we made love, each phrase making me feel more beautiful, more desired than I had felt in years. "You're wonderful, Daisy," he murmured against my skin, so beautiful, so perfect. I felt tears in my eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. It wasn't just physical pleasure, though that was beyond anything I had ever experienced. It was the emotional connection, the feeling that I was truly seen and appreciated for who I was. The room was quiet, except for Eric's regular breathing next to me. I lay there, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. What had I done? The weight of what I had done was crushing down on me, threatening to drown me in guilt. How could I look Alex in the face after this? The thought of looking him in the eye knowing what I had done made me sick to my stomach. But underneath this overwhelming guilt there was something else, a spark of excitement, an excitement I hadn't felt in years. It scared me that I felt so alive, that my skin still tingled at Eric's touch. I thought about my life with Alex, the long silences that had become our norm, the growing distance between us. When was the last time he looked at me the way Eric did? When was the last time I felt truly seen by my husband? I felt torn in two, caught between life as I knew it and the possibility of something new. The excitement of our encounter gave me a temporary boost, made me feel desirable in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. But with this boost came a storm of confusion. How could something that felt so right be so wrong? I thought about the vows I had made to Alex, the life we had built together. Was I really willing to throw it all away for this newfound passion? The conflict between my guilt and the thrill of being desired was almost too much to bear. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, torn between the safety of solid ground and the thrill of free fall. As the night wore on, I drifted in and out of sleep, each time waking up to the fact that Eric was with me. The same questions plagued me each time. What would happen when Alex returned? Could I keep it a secret? Did I want to? The gentle splash of water against the tiles woke me from my sleep. I lay still for a moment, confused. The sound was familiar, but still out of place. Then I realized Eric was in the shower. My eyes widened, my heart racing as the memories of the previous night came back to me. I sat up slowly, startled by the pleasant ache in my muscles. Eric's scent permeated the sheets, a heady mix of cologne and something unique to him. I inhaled the scent, torn between guilt and the desire to wrap myself around him forever. I made my way to the kitchen and started the coffee maker, the smell of brewing coffee filling the air and pulling me into the familiar routine. But as I reached for a cup, I saw my reflection in the window and froze, staring at the woman looking back at me. She looked different, somehow younger. There was a glow in her cheeks, a sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. I touched my face, half expecting the image to shatter like a mirage, but it didn't. The woman in the reflection was me, a version of me I had forgotten existed. The bathroom door opened and Eric stepped out, his towel dangling over his hips, my breath caught in my throat. He looked even more handsome in the morning light, his damp hair disheveled and a soft smile on his lips. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, crossing the kitchen in a few long strides. Before I could answer, he pulled me to him and kissed me. It was not the hesitant, passionate kiss of last night. It was soft and tender, as if we had been doing this for years. And God help me, I melted into him. "Eric," I whispered, not sure whether to push him away or pull him closer. He smiled that smile that made me weak in the knees and poured himself a cup of coffee. "So," he said, leaning against the counter, "we have 2 whole days ahead of us. What should we do? 2 days." Those words hung in the air between us, full of possibility and danger. I thought about Alex, about our marriage. When was the last time we were excited to spend time together? When was the last time he looked at me the way Eric was looking at me now? A feeling of guilt swept through me, but it was soon overshadowed by an excited anticipation. Eric put down his mug and pulled me to him again, his lips caressing my ear as he whispered his plans for the day. A picnic by the lake, a walk in the woods, dinner under the stars. Simple things, but the way he said them sounded magical. I closed my eyes and let his words wash over me. It had been so long since someone had put so much thought into spending time with me. It had been so long since I had felt so alive, so desirous. As Eric's arms tightened around me, I had a sudden and startling realization. Had my marriage to Alex ended long before Eric arrived? The thought should have devastated me, but instead I felt a strange calm, as if I was finally accepting a reality I had been avoiding for years. Standing on Eric's lap, the smell of coffee in the air and the sunlight streaming through the window made me feel as if I had woken up from a long, dreamless sleep. For years I had been acting the part of the perfect wife without living in reality. Now, with Eric, I was finally awake. I had a choice to make, and I knew it wouldn't be easy, but for now I chose to live in the moment, to explore this newfound sense of empowerment and self-discovery. Consequences be damned, no matter what happened next, I knew one thing for sure. My life would never be the same again. And you cannot even imagine what happened next. Never leave your spouse and loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe and like.